So, you know, well, atheists have faith just like everybody else. We all put our faith in something. Atheists put their faith in themselves, so they make themselves their own God. They appeal to their own opinions and consciousness for truth and morality and conceptions of justice. And that doesn't make any sense, because you can't look to yourself for truth, because we are not all-knowing beings. We don't have all knowledge, and if we're looking to ourselves for truth, we could always be deceiving ourselves, and thus that's not a reliable place to find truth. There could be things we don't know about reality that could be invalidating everything we think we know. If we trust in just our own opinions about reality, we need revelation from an all-knowing being who has all knowledge, who reveals that to us, who reveals to us the true nature of reality. And, well, because we couldn't have this conversation right now unless you knew the true nature of reality. For all you know, I could be just a figment of your imagination. How do you know? Like, if the nature of reality...
That's where the whole theory of the simulated world comes from. There's
well,
people, not believing in a...
So, you have to put faith in a worldview every time you open your mouth to communicate with somebody. So you're putting faith in the belief that I exist as another entity to gain information from you that you are going to give to me. But if the nature of reality is there aren't different entities and you're the only entity, and all of this is just some kind of illusory experience in your consciousness, then you're not communicating with somebody, you're just having an experience in a consciousness. So, well, the thing is, you don't know. Am I an entity that you're communicating with, or are you communicating with yourself? Do you mind? I mean, if you want to know... If you don't mind, then I guess... I mean, if you don't mind knowing truth and being rational and not being absurd, then... Like, if you care about truth, you'll mind. If you don't care about truth, then just say whatever. If you want to embrace absurdity, you can say, I don't mind. If you want to be an absurd person. Right. Because there's no objective standard outside of God's law. There's one lawgiver whose law applies to all people. And we can't rely on like billions of different opinions concerning the nature of morality, right? Because everybody has different opinions, and so how do you know what's right or what's wrong? Somebody could say rape is wrong, somebody could say rape is great. So who's right? How do we know? It's just a bunch of opinions. That's not morality. Morality is this ought to happen, that ought not to happen, you know? But we can't say that if we just have if we just have billions of opinions floating around. But when we have one opinion that matters, one opinion of somebody who's going to judge everybody according to that opinion and throw them into hell when they reject that opinion, then you have something like that's the closest you can get to objectivity, you know? God says this is the nature of reality. God says this is wrong, this is right. If you reject what God says, you can do that, but you'll end up in hell. And you'll embrace absurdity, and you won't have a standard for saying this is right or that's wrong. You'll just have, hey, this is my opinion. That's your opinion. So, like... No, there's no neutrality. There's no in-between. You're either with God or against Him. It doesn't seem very what? Why doesn't that seem possible? Plausible? Oh. Well, how do you know what's plausible and what's not? You're putting faith in the belief that you exist as a human being, right? Is that plausible? Why is it plausible to believe that? Why is it plausible to...
I'm right here and I'm standing on this ground.
Right.
Hurling through space around a big fire.
Yeah, how do you... But you're putting blind faith in what your consciousness is giving you, and your own, and just one interpretation of those experiences.
Oh yeah.
Like, how do you know that your consciousness is attached to your body? How do you know that the experiences in your vision are actually emanating from your body and connected to your body? Maybe all of this that we're experiencing right now is happening to somebody on a different planet. some other, or maybe a bunch of minds are working in such a way as to create all of what you're experiencing right now. Maybe 1 minute you have one mind working to create the experience of that minute, then the next minute you've got a different mind in a different part of the universe experiencing the next part of what you experience. So you don't, like...
I'd have to give them... I'd have to congratulate them on trying to convince me that I'm in a simulation.
Well, you don't know that you're in a simulation. Like, in your worldview, what are you putting your faith in? That's the question. Like...
I'm not putting my faith in anything. I just know that...
You had to put your faith in something that... You're putting your faith in the belief that you're a human being, right? Communicating with another entity, with another human being, right? Another entity.
I'm talking with myself. I do not define that.
But what do you believe is happening? What are you putting your faith in? You're believing one of those things is happening. You can't believe that both are happening at the same time unless you want to completely defy logic.
Right now, I just think that I'm surrounded by a bunch of organisms, things made out of very complex chemical bonds that somehow manage to continuously form themselves with DNA and stuff over the course of billions of years.
Well, how do you know that? Because that's in your consciousness, because that's what your experience is. But what if your experiences are deceptive? What if that's not true? What if that's an illusion? What? Well, the consequence will be hell if you reject the biblical worldview. So that's pretty important. You know, you're gonna...
I don't believe in hell. Those words are very much weight on me.
Well, just because you believe that something doesn't exist doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And like the prospect of hell, the idea of hell, should scare you. It should be something that you have fear of. What was that?
Some fiery pit with a bunch of layers. What about if you go to heaven, are you guaranteed eternal happiness and joy?
Yeah.
What do? Do you just sing Kumbaya until the end of...
No, there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and life might be a lot like what it is now, but no more pain.
And how is that guaranteed?
No more sin against God. How is that guaranteed? Well, that's what God indicates in His Word, the Bible. And without revelation from the all-knowing being, we can't know the nature of reality. We can't, when you're using language, right? You're trying to use language, and when you say I, what are you referring to? How can you say I? What does that mean?
I'm referring to whoever is
Is that one entity or multiple entities?
Well, it might be multiple entities. I don't know, but
Yeah. So how can you can't even use the word I now. You can't use language. In your worldview, in the atheistic worldview in which you're trusting in this one interpretation of reality that you've just decided to blindly put faith in, you don't know. And it could, what if it's we? Maybe you should be saying we.
I sound like an idiot.
Well, according to your arbitrary standard, you sound like an idiot, but you don't know the nature of reality in your worldview. You don't know. There's no way for you to know because you're appealing to a finite consciousness for truth, and you cannot know truth when you're appealing to a limited consciousness. You need to appeal to revelation from the all-knowing being who's unlimited in his knowledge.
I see no proof that this is a fairy tale that says that God exists. What if God doesn't exist and we really are just hurling through space around some giant fireball or something, and people decide to delude themselves into thinking that some otherworldly entity exists and somehow gets to decide what's right and wrong?
Well, there's really no point in you saying that sentence to me if God doesn't exist, because you don't know that you're communicating with another entity if God doesn't exist, and you can't use the words I or we, because you don't know. Yeah, because of what you believe. But what you believe is not a foundation for knowledge and knowing things. You need to put your faith in a worldview that provides a foundation for knowing things in the first place, that actually makes sense of reality. So my worldview does that. In my worldview, I put my faith in the fact that God created minds to perceive the world that he created so they could operate in it to work for his glory, to have a relationship with him, to have a relationship with other people and communicate with them. That's in my worldview. I put my faith in that. So that makes sense of reality. You're putting your faith in one interpretation of what could be tons of different options, because you're not putting your faith in a revelation from an all-knowing being to give you the certainty. In revelation, you have?
Yeah, I've been a Christian.
Well, you weren't a Christian because you denied the faith, and true Christians don't deny the faith. They continue to be saved.
I believe in God.
Yeah.
And then I grew up and got access to the internet, and I realized that some people think Christianity is stupid.
Yeah, a lot of people think it's stupid, but they're not. They're not thinking correctly. They're not thinking logically. They're appealing to limited consciousness for truth. We have to appeal to unlimited consciousness for truth, to consciousness that knows everything. So that's God. God is three consciousnesses in one being, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, triune God. And he reveals to us the nature of reality. And without that revelation, we can't do anything. We can't communicate. Or if we do communicate, we couldn't know that we're communicating. We can't use language. Like you can't use language. Every time you use the word I, you don't know what I means. So it's meaningless.
Have you ever had dreams? Like you just fall asleep and for whatever reason, some random stuff happens. And you can't make any sense of it.
Yeah. I've had some weird dreams.
I'd like to say that dreaming is normal. My point is, to a Christian, what's a dream supposed to be? Is it just your consciousness doing random stuff that has literally no impact on you?
Yeah, it's well, in the Christian worldview, our mind is part of our soul. So there's the immaterial part of our being and the material part. So we have bodies and souls. And it's either the soul or the spirit. I have to study that more, but there's an immaterial part of your being. So that's, your mind is part of that. And so I don't know why, but our minds have different experiences while we're sleeping. Our minds interact with our brains. They interact with our body. So our bodies do things when we're sleeping. Our brains are functioning when we're sleeping. So our brains influence what our minds are experiencing. So I don't know that much about it.
So obvious or so plausible. So it's hard to explain. For lack of a better term, have you ever had a dream of
another God? I don't believe I have had a dream about another God. Why do you ask? In your worldview, you couldn't know that the dream was nonsense. In your worldview, you could be in a big dream right now. This could be the dream, and what you thought was the dream could actually be reality. What?
I have yet to wake up.
Well, it does matter, because if you don't put your faith in the revelation from God, then you're going to end up in hell. So that does matter.
That's me. Not until I die, of course.
Well, you won't have a second chance to repent after you die. So that's why right now is the time to get right with God. You don't know how much longer you have. You could die today. You could die in the next 5 minutes. We don't know.
I'd like God to go and make it so that it's easier to know. It's not as easy not to believe in him, because right now he's just expecting us to believe in some book that, for all I know, was written by some guys on cocaine or some, whatever drug they had back then. Probably ate some bad shrooms and decided, hey, let's write a novel about some magical being that has the power to decide what we do and call it a religion.
Yeah, that doesn't square with history. Like, again, you need a worldview that provides a foundation for knowledge. So the Bible provides that worldview. So that's why you should trust in the Bible. Every time you try to communicate with somebody, you're putting your faith in a worldview. So right now you're putting your faith in a worldview that does not make sense of reality. So you need to abandon that worldview. The only worldview that does is the Christian worldview. So what are you going to put your faith in?
I think I'll keep my faith where it is.
And that faith is absurd. So you need to turn away from that.
Guys, your faith is absurd.
Because I put faith in revelation from an all-knowing being. How is that absurd? That actually provides the foundation for knowledge, but yours doesn't.
I don't care about the foundation of knowledge. I just care.
Then you've embraced absurdity. You've given up knowledge.
You know, the Easter Bunny and other holiday things like that. Eventually you find out that, oh, well, there's not some hermaphrodite bunny running around laying eggs everywhere. Eventually you find out that that's not how the world works. There's not some magical fat man who goes around and travels the world in a single night and gives every kid in the world gifts.
Well, in your worldview, you can't find anything out. You can't know anything. So it doesn't... The things you're saying...
I have nerves.
What's the point? What's the...